guys, thanks for joining. If you're new to acrylic pouring and wondering what paint mixture and ratios to use for an acrylic swipe, or if you're just struggling to get your acrylic swipe technique to work, today's video is really for you. I'm going to be doing three things. One is sharing my acrylic swipe paint ratios with you. I've got a little summary sheet that you'll be able to take a screenshot of to keep handy so that you can have fun creating your own beautiful swipes. And two, I'll be sharing a few important things to keep in mind when it comes to the ratios. And three, I'm going to be walking you step by step through my paint mixing process to show you exactly how I mix my paints. While I'm about to show you my swipe ratios, please keep in mind that this is definitely not the only way. There are many other options. This is just really my main method that I use. To prepare my base colors, the ones that I'm going to lay down on the canvas before swiping over them, those colors I mix 4 parts paint to 8 parts Floetrol to 1 part water, plus 1 drop of silicone. To prepare my swipe color, that's the color I use to swipe over the paints, I mix that color 4 parts paint to 8 parts Floetrol to 3 parts water. So if you compare the two, the base colors are a thicker consistency than the swipe color, and the base colors contain silicone. Silicone is really that key ingredient for creating the cells. So obviously then the swipe color is a thinner consistency and it doesn't have any silicone in it. So those are the key concepts. Again, as I mentioned earlier, there are many different ways of doing a swipe, and sometimes I mix up how I do mine. This is just really my main method of how I do a swipe. As with anything in life, it's always good to read the fine print. So this brings me to part 2, where I wanted to share a few things to keep in mind as it relates to these ratios. So these ratios work for the specific brands and products that you see pictured on the screen. So if you're using a different paint brand, pouring medium or silicone, that is going to affect how your painting turns out, and that you might need to adjust your ratios depending on the different brands and pouring mediums that you're using. If you're using Liquitex Basics paint, these ratios will probably work, but if you were using a craft paint, those are usually quite a lot thinner than Artist Loft paints. So you might need to add a bit less Floetrol and potentially no water or not as much water. Also, if you're using a pouring medium other than Floetrol, you might get a different result. So just keep in mind that the specific products that you are using all affect the result that you get. The other thing I just wanted to mention is that the amount of paint mixture that you're using will affect how much silicone you need to add to it. If you're using a large quantity of paint, then you might need to add a few drops of silicone to the paint versus only 1 drop. So if, for example, I was using this cup, I'd add 1 drop of silicone to it. And if I was using more than half of this cup full of paint mixture, then I'd add about 2 drops of silicone to it. And if I was using this cup, then I'd probably add about 4 or 5 drops. So I've explained the ratios, so let's look at theoretically what that means when you're mixing paint. And then we'll actually mix some paint. So when we say 4 parts paint, that just means if your starting quantity of paint is, for example, 10 grams, then you'd add 4 times 10 grams to give you 40 grams of paint. Then to that you'd add 8 parts of Floetrol, so 8 times 10 grams to give you 80 grams of Floetrol. And then you'd add 1 part of water, so 1 times 10 grams to give you 10 grams of water. And that's really the way you go about calculating things. Let's get into the actual paint mixing. So our cup weighs 17 grams. To that, I'm adding 4 parts of paint. In this case, 1 part just happens to equal 17.5 grams. So 4 parts of paint is 70 grams. And that added to the weight of the cup of 17 grams means that the total weight on the scale needs to get to 87 grams, at which point I'll then have 4 parts of paint in the cup. This scale actually does allow you to zero out the weight of the cup so that you only see the weight of the paint in the cup, but I personally don't like to do that because sometimes I get interrupted partway through my mixing and then the scale switches off, and then when I switch it back on, I'm not sure whether the weight it's showing me is the weight with the cup or the weight without. So I just prefer not to zero out anything and to just deal with the full weight of everything. Now we're going to add 8 parts of Floetrol to that. So 8 times 17.5 grams equals 140 grams. And if you add 140 grams to the 87 grams already on the scale, that gives you 227 grams. So I'll stop adding Floetrol when it gets to 227 grams. By the way, you should always use a sieve to add your Floetrol because it can be lumpy, and then your paint mixture will end up lumpy if you didn't use a sieve. Also, once you're finished using the sieve, be sure to rinse it off with water because before it dries. Otherwise, you won't be able to get the Floetrol off, and you won't be able to use the sieve again. and don't ask me how I know that. Finally, we need to add our 1 part water, so 17.5 grams of water added to the 227 grams already in the cup takes the total weight up to 244 grams. Next, we just mix the paints. I like to use this drill with a paint stirrer attachment on it, but you definitely don't need to use this. Mixing with one of these little sticks by hand works perfectly fine. It just takes longer. So, I mean, what I like about the drill obviously is that it's a lot quicker, and I know that my paint is mixed really well when I've finished using it. By the way, I'm going to be listing all the products in the description box in case you need to find any of these things. Because I go through quite a bit of paint, I store my mixed paints in these bottles so that they're ready to use, whenever I need them. I always add the paint name to the bottle as well as the ratio that the paint is mixed in so that I can keep track of what's going on. Please note that I don't add any silicone to the paint at this stage. I only add the silicone when I'm actually about to create a painting. I don't add it to these storage bottles. To mix the swipe color, you simply follow the same process that I did for the orange paint, but instead of adding 1 part of water to the mixture, you'd add 3 parts of water. On the day of your swipe, just pour your base colors into little cups and add a drop of silicone to them. Then place those base colors onto the canvas, add your swipe color to the canvas, and then do your swipe. To do my swipes, I typically either use a piece of plastic that I've cut out from the wrapper that the canvas comes in, or I use a palette knife, but it's really up to you. There are many different options. Those are just my preferences. Anyway, thanks so much for watching. I hope that was helpful and that it mostly made sense. If you'd like to see more fluid acrylic art tutorials like this, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. And I look forward to seeing you again next time.